He won over 60 duels and never lost once. But the thing he said mattered most had nothing to do with swordsmanship. In feudal Japan, when samurai culture had elevated combat into an art form and a warrior's worth was measured almost entirely by technical mastery, one man spent decades winning every fight he entered and growing quietly. Troubled by what winning was costing him, he fought his way across the country, undefeated, famous, and increasingly aware that something essential was missing from everything he'd built. His name was Miyamoto Musashi. And the question he couldn't stop asking himself, even at the height of his reputation, was this: what is skill actually for if the person wielding it is hollow inside? The samurai world of his era had a precise and demanding answer to what made a great warrior. Technique, relentless, obsessive refinement of technique, the angle of a cut, the grip on a handle, the positioning of the feet. Every element codified, practiced, drilled until it happened without thought. The assumption was that perfection of method produced perfection of warrior. Get the outer form right and everything else follows. This logic sounds familiar because we still use it. We optimize processes, build skill stacks, collect certifications, track performance metrics. The culture around mastery in any field, whether it's business or sport or creative work or personal development, is almost entirely focused on the refinement of method. Get better at the thing. Measure the improvement. Repeat, and plenty of people follow this path and become genuinely excellent at what they do. And some of them, at some point in that excellence, start feeling strangely empty. Like something got left behind in the pursuit of getting better. Musashi noticed this happening to fighters all around him. Technically brilliant men who were brittle under real pressure. Warriors who trained constantly and crumbled when the conditions weren't ideal. Skilled people whose skill felt disconnected from any deeper reason for having it. Pay attention to what he did about it, because this is where it gets unusual. He stopped seeking opponents. For a man whose entire identity had been built on combat, this was almost incomprehensible to people around him. He retreated. He studied painting, calligraphy, sculpture, tea ceremony, arts that had nothing to do with fighting and everything to do with stillness, presence, and the quality of attention you bring to a single moment. He wasn't abandoning his craft. He was trying to understand what his craft was actually teaching him underneath all the technique. What he discovered, and what he spent the last years of his life writing about in a small text called The Book of Five Rings, was that mastery of any art eventually leads to the same place if you follow it far enough. Beyond the techniques, beyond the strategies, beyond everything that can be taught and drilled and measured, there is a quality of mind, clear, unattached, fully present, not thinking about what just happened or what might happen next. Just here, completely, with whatever is in front of you. He called this the void. Not emptiness in the sense of having nothing. Emptiness in the sense of being available for everything. The mind that isn't cluttered with self-consciousness, fear, desire for outcome, or attachment to its own reputation. The mind that can respond to what is actually happening, rather than what it expected or hoped would happen. Here is what he actually wrote near the end of his life. Think lightly of yourself, and deeply of the world. That's it. That's the instruction. Consider what it means in context. This is a man who had survived 60 duels, who had won a legendary contest at age 13, whose technical ability was so far beyond his contemporaries that almost no one could challenge him. And his final summary of what mastery requires is, stop thinking so much about yourself. The self-consciousness that comes from high skill is one of the least discussed problems in any field of excellence. When you're a beginner, you're too focused on survival to be self-conscious. When you're intermediate, The technique demands your attention. But, at a certain level of expertise, something shifts. You know how good you are. You know your reputation. You know what people expect. And suddenly, there's this audience inside your own head watching every move you make, evaluating it, comparing it to your standard, worrying about whether it measures up. That internal audience is the enemy of the void. It's the thing that makes excellent performers choke at critical moments. It's why technically superior athletes get beaten by less skilled competitors who simply want the outcome more and think about themselves less. The skill is there. The self-consciousness smothers it. Musashi's answer was cultivation of spirit alongside cultivation of technique. Not as an afterthought, not as a nice addition to the real work, but as inseparable from it. He believed a warrior who only trained the body and the method was building a structure with no foundation. Eventually, the structure falls. And this applies directly to whatever you're trying to get good at. You've probably had moments where your skills surprised you, where something came out better than you expected, almost effortlessly, when you weren't trying to perform and were just doing the thing. Athletes describe it as being in the zone. Musicians call it when the music plays itself. Writers have it when the sentence arrives fully formed before they consciously thought of it. Those moments aren't accidents. They what happens when the self-watching audience goes quiet and the skill is allowed to operate without interference. The question Musashi would ask you is, what are you doing to cultivate that quality of mind, not just the skill attached to it? Because technique without spirit produces a specific kind of person. Someone who is excellent in controlled conditions and fragile under genuine pressure. Someone who performs well when their ego is safe and falls apart when it's threatened. Someone whose identity is so wrapped up in being skilled that failure feels like annihilation rather than information. Spirit without technique produces a different problem. Conviction without craft. Passion without precision. Good intentions that can't be translated into effective action. The balance is the thing. And the balance requires treating both as real work. For you, this might mean that alongside whatever you're practicing, you also practice sitting with uncertainty, getting comfortable not knowing the outcome. Attempting things where failure is genuinely possible and noticing that you survive it. Taking your skill into contexts where your reputation doesn't precede you and starting from zero again. All of those things train the part that technique cannot reach. Musashi painted, Musashi made sculptures. Not to become a painter or sculptor. To practice approaching something with a beginner's mind, with no reputation to protect. With pure attention as the only thing on offer. That practice fed everything else. He died at 61, alone in a cave where he'd retreated to write his final thoughts. No audience, no legacy management, just a man at the end of his life, clear about what he'd learned and writing it down for people he would never meet. The undefeated swordsman said, "Think lightly of yourself." There's something worth following in that for a long time. Subscribe if this one resonated. Next video goes into Musashi's specific rules for how to move through the world without wasted energy.